And I can tell you the exact night I stopped being the steady girlfriend and became invisible to the man I loved. It wasn't during a fight or even in the aftermath of some betrayal. It was when he looked at me across a crowded restaurant table surrounded by his friends and laughed when someone asked what I did for a living. He didn't even mean it cruelly, at least not on the surface. But cruelty doesn't always come dressed in anger. Sometimes it hides inside a joke. I'd met Evan 6 years earlier in college. He was all charm and momentum, majoring in PR, building a network before graduation, always the loudest voice in the room. I was the opposite, a software engineer who preferred screens and silence to small talk. We were opposites, and at first that balance worked. He once said I grounded him, and I remember smiling at that word like it was a compliment. It isn't. It's something you say about an anchor, steady, useful, but meant to stay still. When he got his first big PR job downtown, I was proud. I even turned down a relocation offer with a top software firm in Seattle to stay in his city because he said long distance kills relationships. I believed him. I believed in us. We built a small apartment life together, shared grocery lists, takeout nights, candles on cheap IKEA tables. It was humble, but it was ours. I thought that kind of consistency meant love. But lately, consistency had become routine, predictable, unimpressive, especially when compared to Evan's friends and their shiny jobs in finance, marketing, and law. Every dinner out with them felt like an evaluation. I'd sit there listening to discussions about campaigns and clients while sipping my wine quietly until someone inevitably asked, "So, Margaret, what do you do again?" I'd smile. Software engineering, back end systems mostly. And before I could explain further, Evan would laugh and add, "She keeps the lights on, literally. Tech stuff, not my world." Everyone would chuckle politely. That night, though, he said something different, something that settled in my chest like a stone. "Margaret's dependable. You can set your watch to her." Dependable. It sounded like a compliment to strangers, but to me, it was the sound of a door closing. At home later, I asked him why he said it like that. He shrugged. "You are dependable. That's a good thing." Then, half under his breath, "You just don't spark much anymore." That was the first crack in the floor. Weeks passed. His hours stretched longer. Work dinners, networking events, always just another client meeting. He'd come home past midnight smelling like expensive perfume I didn't own. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe the story I'd built about us. But trust needs tending, and he'd stopped watering it long ago. One Thursday evening, the office server maintenance wrapped early, and I decided to surprise him with his favorite takeout and a bottle of wine. I remember humming as I walked into the apartment, our playlist still looping faintly from the smart speaker. But the humming stopped the moment I saw the laptop glowing on the kitchen table. Evan never left his laptop unlocked. That night it was open an email draft half typed. At first I told myself not to look. I hated that version of myself, suspicious and small. But then I saw the subject line, "Last night was everything, Maddie." And curiosity broke into instinct. The thread stretched all bookings under initials, pictures her face angled perfectly smiling at him the way I used to. A vascular surgeon judging by her email signature, Dr. Madeline Shaw, the kind of woman who saves lives for a living. The kind Evan once said understands ambition. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there staring at proof that my love story had expired quietly while I was busy being dependable. When the front door opened an hour later, he looked startled to see me home. "Hey, babe," he said, hanging his jacket casually. "You're early." His voice was smooth, unbothered, the voice of a man who thought the world still revolved around him. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I just asked, "Who's Madeline?" He froze for a second, eyes darting to the table. Then nothing. No panic. Just that same detached confidence. "Oh," he said like he'd forgotten she existed. "So you saw that." My stomach dropped. "You've been seeing her." He nodded once. "For a while, yeah. Just like that. For a while, yeah." The conversation that followed felt like walking barefoot on glass. Every sentence cut deeper. "You've been comfortable, Margaret," he said. "Safe. I need someone who pushes me. Maddie's in medicine. She's driven intense." I could barely hear my own voice when I asked, 6 years Evan, "You're throwing 6 years away because my job isn't thrilling enough." He smiled faintly. "Come on. Don't make this dramatic. You'll be fine. You always are." That's when I realized he'd already left me emotionally months ago. This was just the formality. I remember looking around the apartment, the books I'd organized, the candles I'd lit, the quiet life we'd built together. All of it suddenly felt like stage props from a play I hadn't realized had ended. He kept talking about growth and energy, about how we'd grown apart. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just said, "You wanted excitement, Evan. I hope she gives you fireworks." He looked confused. "That's it." I nodded. "That's it." Then I walked out mid sentence, the door closing with the softest click I'd ever heard. That night, I didn't scream into my pillow. I didn't call my friends or post cryptic quotes online. I sat by the window, the city lights flickering across my reflection, and whispered to myself. He wanted noise. I gave him silence. And for the first time in years, that silence felt like power. Morning light spilled through my half closed blinds, turning my small apartment into a pale watercolor of memories and mistakes. I didn't cry that night, but I felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out the sound inside me. The only proof I was still alive was the rhythmic hum of my laptop fan on the nightstand. When the sun rose, I made a decision that startled even me. I wasn't going to fight for someone who'd already left. Evan didn't call that night, not the next morning either. It took him 2 days to reach out, as if cheating was just a scheduling inconvenience. "We need to talk," his text read. No apology, no context. I stared at it for a long time before replying with just one word: "Sure." We met at the cafe 2 blocks from our old apartment, the one where we used to celebrate small things. First job, first raise, first trip together. The barista recognized us, smiled politely, unaware that the couple who once sat shoulder to shoulder there now sat across a chasm. He looked the same: tailored coat, confident posture, but his eyes had that glint of someone rehearsing a speech, not giving a confession. "Margaret," he began, voice soft, performative. "I didn't plan for it to happen. Maddie and I, it just evolved." "Like an app update," I said quietly. He blinked, thrown off by my calm. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You know me. I've always needed a partner who matches my drive. You're steady, but sometimes I feel like I'm pulling us forward alone." I sipped my coffee, eyes never leaving his. "Forward to what, Evan? Another woman's arms." He sighed, frustrated, like I was missing the point. "It's not about her. It's about me outgrowing who I was. You stay the same, Margaret. You're safe, predictable. People like you never get anywhere big." I should have been shaking. Instead, I laughed softly at first, then louder. Heads turned. "People like me." "You mean the ones who held you up when you failed that big pitch? The ones who paid rent while you chased your PR fantasy, unpaid? The ones who made sure you had clean shirts for your networking dinners?" His jaw clenched. "See, this is why I couldn't tell you. You always make things emotional." I felt something shift inside me. The heartbreak began to harden into clarity. You don't get to use words like growth to decorate your betrayal. He leaned back, arms crossed, smirking. "You'll thank me one day. I'm freeing you to find someone on your level." That sentence lodged itself deep, echoing in my chest. For 6 years, I'd built a life where his validation was the reward. I hadn't noticed how small I'd made myself to fit his comfort. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair in. "Thank you, Evan," I said, voice steady, "for showing me that I mistook cruelty for ambition." He frowned. "So that's it? You're just walking away?" I smiled faintly. "You always complained I didn't take risks. Here's one." Back home, I packed my life into 3 boxes. It was astonishing how little space 6 years of love actually took up. Books, sweaters, a framed photo from a cabin trip where he'd once told me he couldn't live without me. I left the frame on the counter. Let him decide what that memory meant now. On a sheet of paper, I wrote just 6 words. "Goodbye, Evan. No need to explain." I placed it next to his favorite mug, the one that said Future CEO. Then I left. That evening, I checked into a short-term apartment across the river. The air there smelled different, freer. I ordered cheap takeout, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank screen of my code editor. For hours, I typed nothing. Then, without planning to, I began writing not code, but memories. A letter to myself. A promise: never again will I let someone mistake your calm for weakness. The first week was a blur of silence. Friends texted asking where I'd gone. I gave vague answers. My therapist, a calm woman named Yvonne, told me something that stuck. "You don't have to be dramatic to be brave." I carried that line with me everywhere. By the second week, the routine began to form. Morning jogs, coffee alone by the window, coding marathons that stretched till midnight. The loneliness still hurt, but it was cleaner now, like pain after surgery. Necessary. At the gym, I met people who didn't care what I did for a living, just whether I showed up and pushed through the reps. Every drop of sweat felt like a small reclaiming of self. One night, while scrolling absent mindedly through my old messages, I saw Evan's name again. He'd sent one final text before I blocked him. I hope you find whatever excitement you're looking for. I stared at it for a while, then typed into my notes app. Excitement isn't a person, it's peace after chaos. Months later, a mutual friend called to update me without being asked. Apparently, Evan and Madeline had gone public quickly. Perfect couple, everyone said, until whispers started that her hospital was auditing some of her cases. He'd quit his job to help manage her schedule. Someone joked they were the power couple who lost the power. I didn't say much, just smiled into the phone. When the call ended, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Let the storm come. I'm finally dry." That night, as I drifted to sleep, my phone buzzed. A new email notification. The sender's name froze me mid-breath. Evan Parker. Subject. Can we talk? I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I turned off the phone, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and let the silence wrap around me like armor. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The email sat there for days, unread, like a ghost knocking softly on a locked door. Every morning I'd see it first thing, his name glowing in my inbox, and every morning I'd scroll past it, because I already knew what it said. Every apology follows the same formula: regret, nostalgia, then self-pity. And I was done being the listener in his redemption arc. By then it had been nearly 4 months since I left. 4 months of silence, healing, and trying to learn how to exist without performing strength for anyone else. At first, the quiet felt unbearable. I used to fall asleep to the sound of Evan's voice muttering half-conscious marketing ideas beside me. Now the only sound was my own breathing. But day by day, the silence changed flavor. It went from emptiness to clarity. It started to sound less like loss and more like freedom. I'd started therapy properly by then. Yvonne, my therapist, was the first person who didn't look at me with pity when I said I'd been cheated on. She just asked, "Did you love him, or did you love who you thought he'd become?" That question sat with me for weeks. Some nights I'd pace around my apartment replaying old scenes like reruns. His smirk at that dinner party, his dismissive tone when I tried to share my project wins. And each time I saw it a little clearer, I'd loved a version of him that existed only because I kept forgiving the real one. Work became my shelter. When I was deep in code, I didn't think about him. I started volunteering for tougher projects, late-night deployments, anything that stretched my focus to exhaustion. My team noticed. My manager called me into her office one Friday. "Margaret, I'm recommending you for the systems architect track," she said. "You've been on fire lately." Her words caught me off guard. Fire. It felt ironic being called that after spending years being told I wasn't exciting enough. That night, I walked home under the city's amber glow, feeling like maybe finally I was starting to build something that was only mine. One evening during a team outing, someone mentioned spotting Evan at a charity gala with Madeline. The tone of voice said more than the words. Pity mixed with curiosity. "He didn't look great," my coworker said, "like he's aged 10 years. I pretended to shrug it off. But when I got home, I couldn't resist checking. Her social media was still public. Perfectly curated photos: Madeline in a black gown, Evan. Beside her eyes, dull, despite the smile. The captions reeked of forced joy. But one thing caught my eye. Investigation stuff clears soon. Hang in there. Investigation. I stared at that word far longer than I should have, and then almost against my will, I smiled. Karma doesn't need your permission. It doesn't even need your attention. It just works quietly like background code, cleaning up corrupted data. And I wasn't going to interfere. I'd already paid my dues in heartbreak. The universe could handle the rest. Weeks later, my friend Mila dropped by with wine and takeout. She'd been the only one who hadn't tried to tell me maybe it was a misunderstanding. That night, between bites of cold noodles, she said, "I ran into someone who works with Madeline. Word is the hospital's reviewing her surgeries. Some billing mess, maybe fraud." Evan's name came up too. Apparently he's been freelancing her PR, but it's tanking. I didn't say a word. I just took another sip of wine, watching the rain race down the window pane. Mila smirked. "You're not going to say anything, huh?" "No," I said softly. "Some stories end better when you don't narrate them." By then, I'd started journaling every night. Not about Evan, not directly, about the way I was changing. Entry day 98. I'm not broken, just repurposed. Entry day 120. The silence that used to scare me is now the proof I survived him. It's strange how life starts to refill itself when you stop trying to chase the people who emptied it. I began joining small tech meetups again. Met people who saw value in my quiet focus instead of mistaking it for dullness. One guy, Noah, asked me about a new AI module I'd built for work. When I finished explaining, he said, "That's incredible. You make complex things sound simple." It wasn't flirtation, it was respect. And I realized how long it had been since someone looked at me like that with admiration instead of condescension. Then came another email. Same sender. Different tone in the subject line this time. "I miss you, Margaret, please." I hovered over delete, but curiosity won for a second. Inside it said, "Things with Maddie aren't what I thought. She's under stress, the investigation's tearing her apart, and I miss what we had. The peace, the stability. You were home. Can we talk?" Home. The word that once felt sacred now read like an insult. Because to him, home was never about love, it was about convenience. I closed the email and archived it. No anger, no tears. Just quiet certainty. He didn't want me. He wanted relief from the chaos he'd chosen. That night I stood on my balcony, wind in my hair, city lights flickering like Morse code across the skyline. For a moment, I imagined his life unraveling somewhere across town, his phone lighting up unanswered, his words bouncing off the walls of an empty apartment. And then I let the thought go. Because I finally understood the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. In the silence that followed, I smiled. I'd spent years craving his attention. Now I had something rarer, my peace. He taught me how to vanish quietly. I wrote in my journal, and in doing so, he taught me how to live loudly inside my own skin. It started with a rumor, small, harmless, almost forgettable. A coworker mentioned over lunch that she'd seen Evan's name floating around social media again, but not in the way he'd want. Something about a hospital review, a PR disaster, and a surgeon under fire. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. Life has a way of forwarding you the news you've already stopped waiting for. 2 weeks later, Mila showed up at my door again, breathless, holding her phone like it was breaking news. "You have to see this," she said, scrolling rapidly before handing it to me. On the screen, a local news headline: "Prominent vascular surgeon under investigation for billing fraud and malpractice allegations." The accompanying photo showed Dr. Madeline Shaw perfectly coiffed, but with eyes that betrayed exhaustion. And standing behind her in the background, like a misplaced accessory, was Evan. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even pretending to be the confident PR star anymore. Just a man caught in the blast radius of his own choices. Mila exhaled sharply. Word is she overbilled insurance companies and performed unnecessary procedures. He was helping spin her public image until it all came crashing down. I handed her back the phone quietly. "Do you feel bad for him?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said, "but I don't feel good either. I just don't feel anything." That night, I lay awake watching the ceiling fan slice through the dark. A strange calm settled over me. Not satisfaction, not revenge, but closure that didn't need an audience. Because deep down I understood what was happening. Evan had traded stability for spectacle, and spectacle always burns brightest right before it dies out. Over the following month, the news snowballed. Madeline's medical license was suspended pending review. A few of her ex-patients came forward with lawsuits. Hospitals severed ties. Her glossy reputation turned radioactive overnight. And with her fall came his. The PR firm Evan worked for temporarily terminated his contract. He'd resigned publicly to focus on supporting his partner through a difficult time, but anyone could see the truth: he'd hitched his name to a sinking ship. Mutual acquaintances started whispering again. Someone told Mila that Evan had been different lately, withdrawn, controlling. Apparently, he'd convinced Madeline to quit medicine for her mental health and depend on him financially while he handled damage control. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who once mocked me for being too steady was now obsessively clinging to the ruins of the life he thought was exciting. One afternoon, I found myself at the same cafe where we'd had that final talk months ago. Different table, different me. The barista, still recognizing me faintly, asked, "Haven't seen you with your boyfriend lately." "Everything good?" I smiled. Better than good. I'd long since stopped checking his socials, but sometimes the internet doesn't wait for you to look, it finds you. A tagged post appeared in my feed one morning, a charity event full of local professionals and reporters. There she was, Madeline alone. Her smile stretched too wide, eyes hollow. No Evan in sight. The caption read, "Bravery means facing consequences with grace." I didn't like it. Grace is easier when you didn't create the storm. Around that same time, I got promoted officially lead software architect. It was the kind of role Evan would have bragged about on LinkedIn for months, but I didn't post about it. I just quietly updated my email signature and went for a walk along the river. The wind was crisp that evening, carrying the scent of rain and pavement. Somewhere across the city, I imagined Evan sitting in a dim living room, the TV flickering, with his own scandal looping on replay. Maybe he'd think of me. Maybe he wouldn't. It didn't matter anymore. A few nights later, a new email appeared. The subject line, "I don't know who else to talk to." I knew who it was before I even opened it. "Margaret, you probably saw the news. Everything's falling apart. Maddie's been suspended and we're drowning in debt. I thought I was helping her, but she's changed. She won't listen, won't let me fix anything. I miss what we had. You were my calm. You always knew how to ground me. Please, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, the irony almost poetic. He was asking for the same boring stability he once despised. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Finally, I wrote one sentence. "You made your choice, Evan. Live it." Then I hit send. A week later, a mutual friend texted me. "He's been showing up places asking about you. Looks rough. You might want to block his new number." I already had. Some lessons don't need repetition. That night I journaled again. Entry day 186. I didn't wish him pain. I just stopped wishing him comfort. For the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for closure from him because I'd already given it to myself. There's a line my therapist once said that echoed in my mind. Some people don't deserve your silence as punishment. They deserve it as peace. So I kept my peace. I didn't tell anyone when I signed the new lease for a better apartment. Didn't mention that I'd started hiking on weekends. Didn't share how light the air felt these days. The world didn't need to see my healing to know it was happening. By the time the news cycle moved on and Madeline's case faded from the headlines, I barely remembered the ache that once consumed me. I'd outgrown it quietly, like shedding a skin. And somewhere in that stillness, I realized something profound. When the storm finally found them, I didn't even need to watch, because I'd already walked out of the rain. The silence had lasted almost a year, long enough for scars to turn into faint lines, long enough for his name to stop echoing in my chest, but not long enough apparently for him to stop trying to reach me. It began with another email, then another, then calls from numbers I didn't recognize, voicemails that started polite, turned pleading, and finally desperate. The first one said, "Margaret, I know you don't owe me anything, but please hear me out. Things got bad, really bad. Maddie, she's not the person I thought. I made a mistake." I didn't reply. The next one came 2 days later. "You were my stability, my calm. I was stupid to let that go. I just need to talk to you. Please." Still, I stayed silent. Then came the anger. "Ignoring me is childish. I'm trying to make amends." "You're not perfect either, Margaret." It was always the same pattern with him. Every apology was just a different version of control. When words didn't work, he changed tactics. Messages started coming from other people. His mother emailed me the subject line, "Family sticks together." "Evan's going through a hard time, dear. He's always spoken highly of you. Don't turn your back now. He needs kindness." Kindness. As if I hadn't bled kindness for 6 years straight. Then a mutual friend, Sarah, left a voicemail. "Come on, Margaret. He's falling apart. You've moved on. You can afford to be generous." Generous. That word stung. They made it sound like forgiveness was currency I owed. By the third week even, his tone changed again, resentful, bitter. "You think you're better than me now? You're not. You're just cold. I hope your new life's as empty as you are." I didn't even flinch. That used to be his favorite trick, cut deep, then pull back with tears and apologies. Not this time. The universe must have sensed my steadiness because almost simultaneously it handed me a new chapter. One crisp morning, I got an email from my manager titled "Promotion Confirmation." I stared at it for a long time, rereading the line that said, "Congratulations, lead systems architect, global operations." My hands trembled, not because I was shocked, but because I realized I hadn't needed his approval to climb. I'd done it all quietly in the same silence he once mocked me for. That weekend, I attended a friend's wedding, a small rooftop ceremony under a sky full of fairy lights. People laughed, danced, toasted to love that still believed in itself. And somewhere between the music and laughter, I saw him. Evan. He looked ordinary. No tailored arrogance, no charming grin. just a tired man standing at the edge of a crowd that no longer revolved around him. He spotted me. His eyes widened, and for a split second I saw that same flicker of entitlement, the belief that if he spoke, I'd still listen. He walked toward me, slowly rehearsing his regret in every step. "Margaret," he said softly, "you look good. Better than I remember." I smiled politely. I could say the same, but I'd be lying. He flinched, then chuckled awkwardly. "I deserved that." "Deserved much more," I replied. He exhaled, looking down at the floor. "Everything fell apart after you left. I thought I wanted adventure, but I was chasing noise. Maddie's gone now. She lost her license, Margaret. And me, I lost everything." His voice cracked just enough to sound rehearsed. I waited until he was done, then said quietly, "You didn't lose everything. You threw it away." He looked at me, like a drowning man spotting the shore. "I just need one chance. We were good together. You made me calm." I shook my head. "No, I made you comfortable. That's not the same thing." He frowned. "So that's it. You're really that heartless." Heartless. The irony almost made me laugh. I took out my phone, opened my email, and showed him the screen my new promotion letter. "Lead systems architect," I said. "Global ops." They wanted someone dependable. For a moment, the words didn't register. Then I saw it, the flicker of disbelief turning into regret. "You're doing well," he muttered, almost resentful. "I am," I said simply, and I did it without being exciting. He swallowed, eyes glossy. "Can't we start over?" I tilted my head slightly. "Evan, starting over implies there's something left to build on." "There isn't." Then I smiled, soft but unshakable. "You once said I was predictable. Turns out peace is pretty consistent." I walked away before he could answer. Behind me, I heard him call out, "Margaret, wait." I didn't. Because for once, he was the one standing in the silence. Later that night, when I got home, I opened my journal and wrote, "Entry day 3 and 12, he chased chaos, thinking it was life. I built peace, and it became mine." The next morning, my phone buzzed again, one final message. "You'll regret this one day." I stared at it, then took a screenshot of my promotion letter and replied with 6 words. "I'm not boring anymore. Goodbye." Then I blocked him for the last time. At lunch, Mila called laughing. "He's furious. Apparently your response went viral in our group chat." "Good," I said, smiling. "Let him finally know what quiet confidence sounds like." That night, I looked at myself in the mirror before bed. No tears, no anger, just calm. I whispered to my reflection. He used to think my silence was weakness. Turns out it was rehearsal. It's strange how life reclaims itself after heartbreak, not all at once, but in small, steady breaths. Somewhere between the early mornings and late night coding sessions, I stopped counting days since Evan. Time lost its edges. The ache faded like an old bruise. Now, when people ask if I'm single, I smile, not from sadness, but peace. Because for the first time, my life isn't defined by what I lost, but what I found after letting go. A year had passed since that rooftop wedding. I'd relocated to a new city for the promotion's sleek skyline, clean air. The kind of place where no one knows your story unless you tell it. My new apartment overlooked the river, its windows catching sunrise light, just the way I liked gold on glass, silent and unassuming. I decorated the space with calm colors, ivory, warm brown, a single green plant that somehow refused to die. Every inch of it felt earned. On my first morning there, I brewed coffee and watched boats glide across the water. The old version of me would have snapped a photo, captioned it. Something poetic, maybe even tagged Evan subconsciously. This version of me didn't. I just took a deep breath and whispered, "You made it." Some evenings I'd walk home past a nearby park. There I often saw couples on benches holding hands, arguing softly, laughing about things that would probably hurt later. I used to envy that closeness. Now I only admired it from afar. It wasn't that I'd stopped believing in love. I'd just stopped mistaking noise for connection. Love, I realized, isn't a spark. It's a steady flame, quiet, constant, sometimes invisible, but warm. One Saturday afternoon, I met Noah again, the man from the tech meetup who once admired my project explanation. We'd kept in touch, casually exchanging articles and coffee recommendations. He'd moved to the same city recently, coincidentally joining a partner firm that collaborated with ours. We met for lunch, just 2 colleagues catching up, or at least that's what I told myself. But when he listened, really listened to my stories, I caught myself smiling without effort. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't talk over me. He didn't make me feel small so he could feel tall. And when he said, "You seem peaceful," I almost laughed because no one had ever used that as a compliment before. That evening, as we parted ways, Noah said gently, Maybe we can do this again sometime. I nodded. I'd like that. But I didn't rush to label it. Not everything quiet has to become a storm. Weeks passed. Work flourished, friendships deepened, and for the first time I stopped narrating my life in past tense. Every day wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. One night, as I prepared a late report, my phone buzzed, a notification I hadn't seen in months. A name I'd buried under blocked lists somehow resurfaced: Evan Parker. He'd created a new email address. The subject line, one last thing. I stared at it for a long time before curiosity got the better of me. Margaret, I saw your recent work mentioned online. You really did it. I just wanted to say congratulations. I miss who we used to be. I hope you're happy. Truly. I reread the last line twice. It didn't sting. It didn't soothe. It just was. Like reading the weather report for a city you no longer live in. I hit delete without replying. Because sometimes closure isn't a conversation, it's a decision. That weekend, I visited the coast, a solo trip I'd promised myself months ago. The sea was wild that day, wind cutting across the shore, waves roaring like they had something to prove. I stood there barefoot, feeling the salt on my skin, the pull of the tide tugging softly at my ankles. Somewhere in the rhythm of the waves, I heard a truth: you don't heal by forgetting. You heal by remembering differently. I closed my eyes, whispering into the wind, "Thank you for breaking me open." Because without that chaos, I would have never met this quiet version of myself, the one who doesn't beg to be understood, who doesn't mistake peace for boredom, who doesn't chase validation disguised as love. When I got home that night, I turned on the soft lights, poured tea, and opened my journal one last time. I wrote, "Entry day 4/12. He called me predictable, but predictability built my peace, my career, my joy. He chased storms. I learned to love the sunrise." I underlined the last line twice, then closed the book. As the city outside drifted to sleep, I sat by the window here, undone music, low laptop humming softly. No emails waiting, no ghosts knocking, just the hum of my own steady life. And in that moment, I realized the silence that once broke me had become my happy ending.